What's up, people? Hatman Strikes Back, Daily Boxing News. An early stream today. Shout out to everybody in the live chat. Who we got in here? Any guy. Chili Beef. Big up. Nathan. Rich Franklin. MT. I think I caught people off guard. Caught them by surprise streaming this early. We're trying something a little different. By way of the connection. Hopefully it holds up a lot better than it has the last few. Hopefully there's no hiccups. Let me know if you can hear me in the chat loud and clear. Hey, big up the box. He says, Wednesday morning live, something good to listen to on my drive home. You been on the night shift, bro? Big up Chippy. Big up Dan Heaney. On an early one today. Big up Tim Yearwood. Interesting name. He said he should fight anyone that was once a champion that is still currently boxing. Knock those extra resume fillers off the list. So, yeah, I've heard some people say that. Personally, I disagree. So, for example, there are people out there saying that Oleksandr Usyk should fight Deontay Wilder. I see no reason why he should. I don't think it bolsters his resume in any way whatsoever, given how washed up Deontay Wilder is. And how good was Wilder anyway to begin with? He beat the guy that beat Wilder twice, so boxing is obviously rock, paper, scissors, but like I say, Wilder's washed. Big up Matthew Wilson. Distant face. Nathan says, I think he loses at least one of those 5, but anyway, who would you pick as the next 5? That's what we're going to get into. In fact, there's a graphic I forgot to prepare, so let me take a screenshot right now. That is the current heavyweight rankings. We're going to get into Oleksandr Usyk, supposedly, according to his advisor, and this information comes via Mike Coppinger of Ring Magazine, Usyk intends to fight about 5 more times. Is he trolling us? Or is this for real? Just getting this screenshot set up. We'll have a look at the heavyweight top 10, but there is a few bits of other boxing news to get to. Again, shout out to everyone who's just joining the live chat now. Thought I'd catch you guys off balance with an early one. Good morning to one and all. I guess it's nearly afternoon now in the UK. Where I am, it's coming up to 1 p.m., so only an hour ahead. Yeah, let me get this graphic situated here. One moment. How you guys feeling? Wednesday the 22nd of October. Who's at work? Who's at home? Who's on holiday? Who's unemployed? All right, here we go. That's the current heavyweight top 10 with all the major sanctioned bodies. We'll come on to it. Big up GMS Nightmare for the super chat. It says Crawford versus Hearns and Duran versus Pacquiao. I slightly lean towards Hearns over Crawford. But I might have said the opposite in a previous stream. It's such a close fight to me. Duran versus Pacquiao. I'm going to go Duran. Big up GMS Nightmare for the super chat. What's up, Julius? Yamazaki says he deserves an easy fight. Look how many top fights he had. Declan says someone is going to get Usyk over the hill. I agree. I think someone's going to get him. Rich Franklin says I'm off today, back tomorrow. All right. Enjoying his day off work. Dan Heaney says, is this December show in jeopardy at this point? Surely that needs an announcement over the next week. Yeah, that's a good point. This December show is supposed to feature Derek Chisora and also Moses Itauma not fighting each other, but fighting other people. We're now in the back end of October. You know, you would have thought there'd be an announcement by now. It's got to be in the next week or so. Otherwise, perhaps it will be off. Yamazaki says, unemployed, any jobs going in Portugal? Anybody in the chat live in Portugal? I've got no idea. Chippy says, 15 minutes to my next meeting. Let's get rolling. Any guy says, I was at work, told my boss laptops crashed. When I saw the title, I might now be unemployed. Hopefully not. Nathan says, Parker, Itauma, Caballero, Jao Pataya, Richard Torres. Yeah, we'll get into that. So first of all, let's talk about the fact that David Haye, in a couple of interviews, said he spoke to Derek Chisora privately. And rather than Chisora saying he's going to fight Jarrell Miller next or Zheli Zhang, according to Haye, Chisora told him he's fighting Dillian Whyte next. The purse split has been sorted, so on and so forth. Now, here's why I'm not taking it as gospel truth. Derek Chisora is a trickster. He's a guy who likes to muddy the waters. He finds it funny. And that includes misleading people who know him, like a David Haye. Because he knows David Haye, or maybe David Haye's in on it with him, is going to go to the media and say, oh yeah, he's fighting Dillian Whyte for a third time. Chisora knows how to play the media. So the fact that David Haye is saying this, in no way in my mind, means that it's concrete, locked in to happen, Derek Chisora versus Dillian Whyte 3. It might happen, but I'm not taking what David Haye said here as evidence or proof that that fight is locked in. That's my take on it. But if it does, how do I see the fight going? Derek Chisora, Dillian Whyte 3, if it happens next? I think Derek Chisora's got a great chance of knocking Dillian Whyte out. Dillian Whyte's punch resistance has been trash for years. He's just coming off a first-round knockout defeat to Moses Itauma. Yes, Dillian Whyte has bounced back well from knockout defeats before, most notably when he got chinned by Alexander Povetkin. He came back at a rematch and destroyed Povetkin. Aggressively. There was no gun shyness or anything. But Dillian Whyte is much older now. He's pushing 40. And as far as I can see, Derek Chisora is a bit more well-preserved than Dillian Whyte. Slightly. He got waved. FV says, I'm on my way to the boxing gym. What are you working on in the gym? What do you guys think of this potential fight here? If it does happen. Dillian Whyte versus Derek Chisora 3. On the graphic there, I really need to swap around the the fighters, because it says Whyte on the left, Chisora on the right, but the fighters themselves are the other way around. Let me swap that. Let's quickly edit that in my little fake version of Photoshop. Let's just rejig that graphic on the fly. Big up Mr. Luca with a super chat. He says, one last title fight and then fight AR, DW, etc. Man loves his acronyms. Big up Mr. Luca for the super chat. Fight news. Big up, big up. Any guy says, I think Chisora is creating these narratives so he can price himself up. That's a very good point. I think you may be onto something there. Pay me more or I'll fight the other guy that fights. That fight's almost made to multiple fighters and he's going to take the most money. Yeah, Chisora is a seasoned negotiator now. He's a tough negotiator too. Big up GMS Nightmare and big up Mr. Luca. I'm still trying to figure out who AR is. Mr. Luca's always got me stumped with these acronyms. DW, I think he means Deontay Wilder, but AR, Andy Ruiz. I guess he means Andy Ruiz. There you go. I figured it out. Mr. Luca always likes to keep me on my toes with these acronyms. Yeah, personally, I don't think he should be fighting. Well, Andy Ruiz, I think there's a better case for him fighting Andy Ruiz than fighting Wilder's so washed. I don't see why he should fight Wilder. Doesn't do anything for his legacy, in my opinion. Yes, big up Fight News. If everyone can get the likes up, we got 81 concurrent viewers, only 15 likes. Damn, what did I do wrong? Can we get at least 40 likes in here, people? Thank you in advance. It really helps the stream get seen by way of the algorithm. Really helps me out. Much appreciated. Thank you. Ayad says, Michael Hunter announced he's fighting someone random yesterday. Yeah, I saw that. Somebody in the Element group just posted it. God only knows what's going on there. But as somebody said earlier on in the chat, this December card is looking shaky right now. To borrow a line from Ralph Smart, it's looking a little shaky, baby. Where's the announcement at? Paladin Poker says, I thought DW was White Hat, man. I don't see why anyone would think Usyk should fight Dylan White, so I'm going to assume he meant Deontay Wilder rather than Dylan White. Dylan White just got chinned around. Deontay Wilder is a former champion, of course. You can ask Mr. Luca to clarify, but I'm pretty sure he means Andy Ruiz and Deontay Wilder. Anyway, let me rejig this little thumbnail here. White versus Chisora. Hold tight, everyone in the live chat. How you doing today? It's an early one. Somebody said, how is South Africa? I'm not in South Africa. I actually did a couple of vlogs on my Patreon page talking about where I am. And somebody replying to what I'd said in the video kept saying that I lived in Gambia. I don't live in Gambia, bro. I live in Zambia, not Gambia. It's a totally different part of Africa, but there you go. Guess it's an easy mistake to make, but I said Zambia several times in the video. Southern Africa. Anyway, let me just get situated with these. Where's this graphic gone here? I'm looking for the Derek Chisora. There we go. There's Dylan White. And by the way, I stopped using Photoshop was it last year sometime? Because on MacBook, they find it's very difficult to get cracked versions. The cracked version always gets patched by Apple. I think they've got some type of deal with Adobe. And look, I've got no problem paying for software. There's loads of software that I pay for. Yeah. The reason I refuse to pay for Photoshop is because they don't allow you to get a perpetual license. Instead, you have to basically rent the software. I don't agree with that. Let me buy it outright. Not all this renting stuff. You know, subscribe. I guess they call it a subscription. You have to subscribe now to our Photoshop. Nah, man. You're taking the biscuit. If they let me get a perpetual license, aka buy it outright, I buy Photoshop. Even if it's, you know, £200, £300, £400 or whatever, I buy it. Because they don't do that, now I'm using a little, it's not a cracked version. I'm using software called Affinity Photo 2, which is like a Photoshop knockoff. It's not as good as Photoshop, but, you know, I make do. So to hell with Adobe and their very cynical business practices. Evil Uncle Phil says, yeah, the subscription model is nonsense. It wasn't always like that. Real cynical. Fight News says, what time is it where I'm at? Right now it is 12:56 p.m. 12:56 in the afternoon. Wave says, I'm in a minority, but I don't like that Frank Warren has all the heavyweights. Can't give them all dates and no company with Eddie Hearn. Agree or disagree, Hatman? I would tend to agree with you. Yeah, he isn't getting these guys out as much as we would like to see him out. I kind of agree with you. GMS Nightmare, that's a whole fact. Rich Franklin says, I'm like that too. I like to buy my stuff outright. Yeah, I got no problem paying for software. Just let me buy it outright. Don't do this subscription thing. You know, don't do the subscription thing. Oh, wow. Any guy says FL Studio and Reason do this now, but Reason still offer a non-subscription option because I have Reason. I use Reason. So you can get the Reason, you can get Reason Plus, which is the subscription where you get all the plugins and access to all the libraries and stuff like that. All the updates come with it. Or you can buy Reason as a standalone where you don't get as much with it. But I'm just using Reason standalone. Yeah. So they at least offer that option. I wasn't aware that FL Studio do that now. That's a shame because FL Studio, one of the great things about FL is that you buy it and you get like unlimited updates for life. But what, you have to keep paying a subscription now? Or is that just on certain tiers? Big up Ocean Blue in the chat. That's right, Chicken and Waffles. Mike P. I think he's beyond help. Big up First Round Boxing. Big up Joshua Hooker. Can you not buy CS6 anymore? I don't know. I don't think you can, but I would want the latest version of Photoshop because it's got the latest tools and whatnot. Attention Interest says, only just logged in. How long we've been going? What did I miss? Been going about what? Let me check here. 20 minutes. We haven't really got into the deep conversations yet regarding boxing. I'm just actually rejigging a little thumbnail here. Let me hurry up and do it. In fact, so I don't get distracted, I'm just going to put a B right back, sign up, and just mute myself for a second while I do this thumbnail. Should take me about a minute or two. Hold tight, everyone in the live chat. All right, there we go. Sorted. So, like I was saying, big up everyone in the live chat, everyone who's just tuning in. How would you guys see this fight going? A third encounter between Derek Chisora and Dillian Whyte if it were to happen next. Who do you see winning and by what method? Let's get a show of hands. The box says, did you see Hunter is fighting a random at your call in December? Yeah, I did see that. Fight News says, yo, I use Reason Hat. Well, I have it and I haven't been able to use it in a while because of work. Yeah, I haven't used it for a bit either, but I do use Reason. I use FL a little bit, Pro Tools. Wave says Chisora points. MT says I picked Chisora by KO. That's what I'd be going for. I'd say Chisora knocks Dillian Whyte out right now. Even Uncle Phil says Chisora within 2. First Round Boxing says, if you're in Africa, does that mean staying up until 4 a.m. for fights again? No, because where I am, the time difference with the UK is only 1 hour. So where I am, we're 1 hour ahead of the UK. So the time difference is negligible. Oliver C says Whyte is done. Completely agree. Ocean Blue says Chisora by KO. Whyte's too chinny to last the distance. Rich Franklin says Chisora round 6. Evil Uncle Phil says the counterpunch in Whyte is no longer. He will get bodied. Yeah, he don't counterpunch like he used to. He ain't got that sharpness anymore. Christian says drug cheat, never fight again. Kick him out. He's obviously talking about Dillian Whyte there. Wave says people are overstating Chisora. Moses would have done the same to him. Okay. I personally doubt that Moses will get Chisora out in 1 round, but you may well be right. It's just my hunch. I think it'd take Moses a couple more rounds maybe to get Chisora out of there. Mike says, would look, but then again, Chisora didn't want to fight Italma. He was offered the fight, I think £2 million or something, and said no. So they'd have to offer him a ridiculous amount because he knows what would happen. Mike says it would look like 2 50-year-old uncles having a scrap and Chisora wins by knockout. Yeah. Simon Jones says, unfortunately, Chisora will win this time, although I'm sure Whyte will have some confidence against Chisora compared to others. Why do you say unfortunately? I guess you're not a Chisora fan? Evil Uncle Phil says Chisora will test the Talma's chin. I'm not sure we'll get that close to it, to be honest. Abraham says Whyte's chin deterioration since AJ fight is insane. It was rock solid back then. Yeah, it was very solid. Even in the first 2 Chisora fights, it was pretty good, but those fights did a lot of damage. Obviously, the AJ knockout did damage. The Chisora fights did damage, and all the sparring wars he's had have done damage to his chin. Maxwell says, Hatman, do you know any remote jobs someone can do that actually work? These days, one of the things that people do is copywriting. Copywriting is like writing text for people's websites, but because of ChatGPT, does that make copywriting jobs obsolete now? But that's one thing people were doing was copywriting. The other one was affiliate marketing. People were doing that online. Is that really a thing anymore? I'm not sure. I'm sorry I can't be of more help in that regard right now. I mean, trading, if you know about markets and stuff like that, you can get into trading, crypto, all that type of business. Oliver C says, personally, I don't mind the fight. The first two were so entertaining. The build-up will be funny. And if they both retire after, happy days. Evil Uncle Phil says, it'll be interesting to see how Whyte behaves in the build-up with Chisora after getting embarrassed by someone younger than his son. For real. Dylan Whyte is a very proud guy, and he got embarrassed in his most recent fight. Anyway, let's move on from this fight here. Let's talk about the main topic of this live stream. Mike Hoppinger was on a panel on the Ring Magazine YouTube channel, and he said, after speaking to an Oleksandr Usyk advisor, I forget the guy's name now, apologies for that, but you can see it in the Mike Hoppinger video that's on screen here. He said after speaking behind the scenes to Usyk's advisor, he says Usyk plans to fight 5 more times before retiring, according to Usyk at the age of 41. 5 fights. Is this real, or is Usyk on a wind-up? According to Mike Hoppinger, he seems to think that it's real. If Usyk is to fight 5 more times, who will those opponents be? Let's discuss. Here we've got the heavyweight top 15, actually, with the 4 major sanctioning bodies. Have a look through the names and then give me some suggestions in the live chat. 5 names. If everyone in the live chat can give me 5 names, I'll pick through them and see what I think of the 5 names that people are choosing. Now, it has to be said that Mike Hoppinger, again, via this Oleksandr Usyk advisor, he's a well-known guy, I just forgotten his name, said that Usyk's next fight will be against the winner of Joseph Parker-Fabio Wardley, as it should be. So that'll be the first fight. So really, I want 4 names from you guys, because it would seem at the moment that the next fight, according to, again, Usyk's advisor via Hoppinger, is going to be the Parker-Wardley winner. So we got one of the names. Well, 2 of the names. But it'll be whittled down to 1 after Saturday. Then 4 other names. Have a look at the heavyweight top 15. Let me know what you guys think. Even Uncle Phil says, I think Usyk is exaggerating. Could be. I hope he is. Because I'd rather see him retire than risk his legacy getting beaten because he's past his best. Because Father Time has caught up to him. Excuse me. Fight News says, I think the best opponent style is Ajit Kabayel. Do you mean the best opponent in terms of how competitive the fight would be, or the best opponent to make an entertaining fight, or the best opponent to have the best chance of beating Usyk? No, it wasn't Klimas waved. It was somebody else. I forgot the guy's name. I mentioned his name in the previous live stream. So FIFA says Parker, Kabayel, Hrgovic, Jalolov, Itama in that order. That is a very solid list. Very solid list. Yusuf says Parker, Kabayel, Zhang, Wilder, Itama. Yeah, I don't see the appeal of Wilder, but, you know, other people got a different view. That's okay. The box says Kabayel, Itama, Okoli. That's interesting. Hrgovic is what I expect. Okay, not necessarily what the box wants, but what he expects. Dominic Hayes says Parker, Kabayel, Fury, Bakoli, Itama. All right. Oliver C says Parker, Pereira in UFC, Jake Paul, and someone else. Be surprised if he fights more than twice, though. MT says Parker, Kabayel, Opataya. That's an interesting one. Itama and maybe Jalolov. Coffee Guy says, I know Parker is on a high, but he beat Bakoli, who came off the couch. Zhang, who dies after a couple of rounds, and Wilder, who in hindsight was shot to bits. I can't argue with that, but it's not Parker's fault. Do you know what I mean? All of those guys were looking good. Well, Wilder was coming off a knockout win over Helenius. So really and truly, yeah, all of the guys were looking good to some extent going into the Parker fight. Zhang just knocked out Joe Joyce twice. You know? So hindsight is always 20/20, but it's not Parker's fault that those guys weren't really all that they seem to be cracked up to be. Do you know what I mean? Lapin, thank you, the box. Yeah, Sergey Lapin. That's the Oleksandr Usyk advisor who, according to Mike Coppinger, says Usyk intends to fight 5 more times. Mr. Lucas says, Luke Partridge, I certainly hope not. The only way that I would be okay with Luke Partridge getting another crack at Oleksandr Usyk is if Luke Partridge goes away and beats at least 2 top 10 contenders. At least 2. Wayne says, Parker, Caballero, Moses Itama, Opataya, maybe Andy Ruiz. Yusuf says, Parker was a huge underdog versus Wilder. Only in hindsight is everyone saying Wilder was shot. Well, now I think Wilder is legitimately shot and was in the Parker fight shot, but we didn't necessarily know that going in to the Parker fight, and neither did Parker. Again, Wilder had just knocked out Helenius in a round. Helenius gave AJ a lot of trouble, obviously, after that. But yeah, Wilder was coming off a first round KO win, 1-punch KO win. So we didn't necessarily know that he was totally shot at the time. So I can't really blame Parker for taking that fight, if you know what I mean. Evil Uncle Phil says, Bacoli literally came off the couch. He bought the pay-per-view. Parker could have chosen Okoli or Adelaide or White. He chose Bacoli knowing he was unfit. Maybe he did, but I can't really blame him for that. Taking an opponent at the last minute isn't just potentially very tough for the opponent who's taking a fight at short notice. It's also potentially tough for fighter number A, right? Or fighter letter A, should I say. Fighter number 1, which in this case was Parker. He was training for Daniel Dubois. So I can't really blame him for picking the most vulnerable of the options that he had. The least ready. Maxwell Graham says, Hatman, you don't live in Costa Rica anymore. No, I don't. I've left. Mike says, Hatman, who's your 5? I know you want him to retire, but in terms of adding greatness, what does it take? Okay, so I'll give you my 5 now. So the Joseph Parker Fabio Wardley winner, that's 1. Next one, I would say, in no particular order, by the way, Moses Itama. I think at some stage, if Usyk is going for supreme legacy and insists on fighting 5 more times and wants to fight 5 names that are going to bolster his legacy the most, I think Itama would probably have to be in there, even though he hasn't done anything yet. Itama, I'm just going off his potential, what I see as his potential. I think that could be a win for Usyk if he were to beat Itama that would age very well. So I'd say, yeah, the winner of Parker Wardley, Itama. I would say then a Filip Hrgović. Maybe an Andy Ruiz, since he's a former champion. And as somebody else said, Bakir Jalolov. Jalolov has not looked good in recent fights, or at least his most recent fight. He looked very poor in that fight. But I do think with the new generation of heavyweights, if he's committed and serious about professional boxing, he can still be a problem. So I will go with those guys. The winner of Parker Wardley, Moses Itama. Who else did I say? Jalolov, Andy Ruiz. I think I got one more, right? Filip Hrgović. We'll go with him. If he beats those guys, it's going to be very difficult for anyone to make a credible argument that even based on resume, he's not top 10. Very difficult. Maybe even difficult to argue he's not top 5 if he beats all those guys without any controversy and any issues. Oh my gosh, how can I leave Caballero out? Yeah, let me swap out Hrgović for Caballero. Excuse me, I totally forgot about Caballero somehow. Thank you for reminding me, you guys in the chat. Yeah, let me swap out Hrgović for Caballero. Thank you. So my top 5, not top 5, but the 5 opponents, I would say if Usyk insists on fight, I think he should retire, but if he insists on fighting on, winner of Parker Wardley, Ajit Caballero, Mose Zitauma, Andy Ruiz. I've already forgotten the other one. Look at my memory. Jalolov, excuse me, and Jalolov. Yeah. Big up Matt Borgerson. He says, do you think Oleksandr Usyk gets knocked out the ring like Bernard Hopkins by the 5th fight at 41 years old? I don't necessarily think he gets knocked out the ring, but I do think he loses if he has 5 more fights. Unless they're like 5 absolute cherry picks. And that's not really Usyk's style. If he's fighting 5 legit guys, I think he loses at least one of those fights. I really do. Especially if he's keeping hold of most of the belts and fighting mandatories. Yeah, I think he loses at least one of those fights. Ocean Blue says, Dwyer is the only man disappointed by the replacement. What's the context of your... Oh, excuse me. Yeah, Caballero, yeah. Replacing Hrgović with Caballero. Yeah, he'd be disappointed by that. He still sees Hrgović as the heir apparent. I think Hrgović is slightly underrated by boxing fans, but Caballero is, at this point, looking a lot better than Hrgović, so... Wayne says, swap Jalolov with Hrgović. I can see that, but I'm still kind of holding out hope that Jalolov has something to offer the professional game. He just needs to get his mind in gear. He's still got this amateur mindset. Stayed amateur for too long, like a lot of the Eastern European guys do, although he's not actually Eastern European, he's Central Asian, but you know what I mean? The old Eastern Bloc guys. We got Matt Borgerson for the super chat. He says, if he wins 4 out of 5 of those fights you mentioned, would you give him more credit than walking away now? Absolutely, I'd give him more credit, but I still give him loads of credit now. I just think that he's reached the point of diminishing returns. I think you could make a case, I'm not saying it's an ironclad case, but I think you can make a case, you can argue a case that he's top 5, top 10 heavyweight of all time right now. I'm not saying I would necessarily agree he's top 5, but I'm saying you can make a case because he's still unbeaten. Because although he hasn't got the deepest heavyweight resume, he's beaten the main guys. Do you know what I mean? So you could argue quality over quantity. You could also argue that a lot of the guys he fought at cruiserweight would have been heavyweights back in the 70s. So you can include his cruiserweight resume when you're comparing him to Muhammad Ali. Do you know what I mean? Because Ali himself and many of the guys he fought in the 70s and the 60s were no bigger than the guys Usyk fought at cruiserweight. You see what I'm saying? So right, if he walks away right now and doesn't fight again, he's unbeaten, only the 2nd heavyweight champion to retire unbeaten in history after Rocky Marciano. The longer he, the further we go in time from his retirement, the more fondly he'll be remembered. That's what tends to happen with most fighters, particularly great fighters. So I think, it's like in it's like if you're playing a game of poker or something, you're gambling, and you're winning. At what point do you walk away from the table? At what point do you keep pushing your luck? Do you know what I mean? Usyk could walk away from the table right now, but it's as if he's getting a bit greedy. So, yeah, big up Matt Borgerson for the super chat. Yes, I'd give him more credit if he fights 5 more times and wins them all, but I don't think it's necessary. I think it's an unnecessary gamble, given what he could lose. Big up Matt every time. We got Big T says, still laughing at Mike P. Yeah, that guy. Some people think he's trolling. I tend to think he's actually serious because really are people out there who are that far gone. We got Matt Borgerson for the super chat. He says, also, do you agree Joseph Parker's last 3 wins are highly overrated? Zhang was too out of shape to stop Parker. Wilder washed, Bacoli too. They notice and fat. I totally agree. But as I said earlier on in the stream, we didn't necessarily know. All those things are being said in hindsight, right? We didn't necessarily know those things going into those fights. Wilder was coming off a 1-punch knockout first round victory over Robert Helenius. At least I didn't realize how washed he was until the Parker fight. And maybe Parker didn't realize how washed. In fact, Parker started that Wilder fight quite cautiously, if you remember. Because he was thinking Wilder maybe still had something left. So we can't really blame Parker for that. Then he fought Zheli Zhang, who was coming off the 2 knockout wins over Joyce, looking great. So can't really blame Parker for that. The only one where you could maybe ask some questions would be Bacoli, because he could have fought Lawrence Okoli, who was better prepared, trains in Dubai, lives in Dubai. Could have fought another fighter, I forget who it was, but chose Bacoli because he knew he probably wouldn't be in shape. That's the idea anyway. So yeah, I totally get the critiques of Parker's recent victories, but you could critique Ajit Kabayel's recent victories too. Do you know what I mean? He beat Makhmudov, but Makhmudov turned out to not be very good. He stopped Frank Sanchez, but Sanchez was clearly injured in that fight. Then he beat Zheli Zhang, but again, Zheli Zhang, we know, has got no gas tank whatsoever. So you could criticize Ajit Kabayel's wins at the moment as well. Big up Matt for the super chat. Mark Hatch says that Helenius KO looked like a dive to me, especially considering Wilder and Helenius are friends. Yeah, I totally disagree with that. I think it was a legit KO. I don't think you could... the way that Helenius' body kind of froze up when he hit the canvas, I think he'd be a supreme actor to be able to pull off those kind of body reactions. I think it was absolutely a legit KO. Yeah, they're friends, sparring partners and all that, but that's why Helenius was so reckless, I think, and walked into that right hand. Familiarity breeds contempt. Oleksandr Usyk has an extreme mentality. He's like a mountain climber, a thrill seeker. Do you know what I mean? He's one of these guys that goes around the world climbing all the different mountains, K2, Everest, risking his life when he doesn't have to. Guy's already a millionaire philanthropist or something, but he insists on doing all this mountain climbing. Going up to the Himalayas. He's got members of his climbing team getting frostbite and losing whole hands and stuff like that, but it don't deter him. Yeah, that's the kind of personality type that Usyk has. Always wants to push it and push it and push it and push it. He loves the challenge. Mr. Lucas says Hrgovic won't get stopped unless it's on cuts. Hrgovic has got a great chin, but he can't have a great chin forever. Matt Borgerson says Bruce Wayne. We either retire a hero or fight on long enough to see yourself become the villain. Luke Partridge. Christian says don't sleep on Parker. I ain't sleeping on Parker at all. Personally, I think he beats Fabio Wardley on the weekend. And I think most other people do. But there's a sizable contingent who are picking Wardley to win, especially the closer we get to the fight. In fact, let's move on to that now. Joseph Parker, Fabio Wardley. Keys to victory. We can talk about that. There you go, JR. Base jumping with his hands tied together. Yeah, Usyk's that personality type. Taking all kinds of unnecessary risks. Yeah, he's built different, as Rich Franklin said there. Usyk is built different. Yeah, Usyk is a real bad man, for sure. Planty Baggy says, Usyk has a crazy mentality, and add to that his skill set. We got Matt Borgerson for the super chat. He says, Parker susceptible to the right hand. Yeah, Derek Chisora dropped Joseph Parker in the opening seconds with a right hand. You guys remember that in the first fight? He had Parker over literally within the first, I think, 10, 15 seconds with an overhand right. So yeah, Parker's susceptible. But Wardley's right hand is really telegraphed. He throws it fast though. But I just feel, particularly with Andy Lee, I like Parker's stance. The way he shapes up with his stance. His body positioning. His jab's always out there to catch you with a straight shot down the middle if you're winding up with an overhand. It's just, if Parker gets a little too overconfident, that's when Fabio Wardley could catch him. But if he boxes the same way as he did against Deontay Wilder, for example, he neutralized Wilder's right hand. If he boxes that way with Wardley, cautious, doesn't let Wardley get too close, keeps him on the end of the jab, nice, snappy, straight shots, I think he beats Wardley comfortably, personally. The box says Joseph Parker's footwork is way overstated. Okay. I think Joseph Parker's footwork is good enough to beat Fabio Wardley. It's not Usyk footwork at all, but I think it's good enough to beat Wardley. Christian says exactly, Hatman, I agree. He is different with Andy Lee. Yeah, I like his stance. He looks more technical now. Before he was more of a freestyler, a bit more athletic, a bit more loosey-goosey with his shape. I'm not talking about his cardiovascular, I'm talking about his boxing construct. Whereas now, it's kind of Kronk-ish. Obviously, Andy Lee was a Kronk fighter. But he's got more of a Kronk-ish type of stance now. A bit more technically correct. I like the way he's looking. Big up Matt Borgerson for the super chat. He says, Wardley isn't washed though. Yeah, Wardley certainly isn't washed. But he was getting totally outboxed by Justice Hooney. All Hooney had to do was play it safe for the final few rounds, and he would have washed Wardley on the cards. Justice Hooney has no power whatsoever. Joseph Parker, I think, can do what Justice Hooney did, but he's got more power. Not like he's a massive puncher, but he's got more power than Hooney for sure. So, yeah, I get the people who are still going with Wardley. They think he's got the one punch and he's a very tenacious guy. He's tough. He's relatively young, but he's not that much younger than Parker, actually. But he's certainly fresher. So I get it, but personally, I got to go with the technical ability, the superior technical ability and the experience of Joseph Parker. And Parker's tough. The only time he's ever been stopped was by Joe Joyce, and he got worn down in that fight. It's not like he just got caught with one punch out of the blue and the fight was over. No, he got worn down gradually and then stopped. He didn't get stopped by Anthony Joshua. He didn't get stopped by Dylan White. Do you know what I mean? He got off the floor in the Zhilei Zhang fight. Now, some people could say if Zhang's catching you as slow as he is, then Wardley will catch you. But Zhang throws straighter shots than Wardley. Wardley throws wide looping shots. Doesn't mean he can't catch Parker. I mean, like I said, Parker was caught in the first round by Chisora in the first fight and dropped. So Parker's going to have to be a lot more on the ball than that against Wardley. Do you know what I mean? Or else he might end up like Fraser Clark. JR says this fight is a borderline mismatch. Adalai versus Hrgovic all over again. Big up Crypt Talk. He says, afternoon, Hatman. I think it'll be one-sided. Parker for the win, too experienced. I'm expecting a pretty comfortable win for Parker. I'm taking Parker on points. Pretty comfortably on points. Kyle says Zhang is skilled. Yeah, Zhang is skilled. Zhang's more skilled than Fabio Wardley. And he's got a southpaw thing going for him. Yep. Yusuf says Wardley as a novice boxer really is not getting near Parker. You know, it's heavyweight boxing. Anything can happen. I'm not saying Wardley's got no chance. He's got a chance. A puncher's chance, I think. But I wouldn't give him anything more than maybe a 30% chance. In my estimation. We'll see if I'm wrong. He's proved me wrong before. Fabio Wardley's proved me wrong at least twice before. So, maybe it'll be a third time here. We'll see. The box says, I actually think Hooney is a better technical boxer than Parker. Yeah, well, that's what Fabio Wardley's trainer, Ben Davison, is saying. He thinks that Hooney's a better technical boxer than Parker. Hooney is a good technical boxer. Clever, sets his little traps, fast hands, keeps his hands up for the most part. He is a good technical boxer. But I don't think there's like a massive gulf in Hooney's boxing skills over Parker's boxing skills. Do you know what I mean? I think they're relatively close. So even if Wardley has a bit more success boxing with Parker than he did against Hooney, I don't think he'll have enough success boxing with Parker to make the difference on the scorecards. I still expect Parker to win and win comfortably. Captain says Parker got a beating by slow Joyce though. Yeah, but Joyce, as slow as he is, was a vastly experienced amateur with a very good jab. And although he looks ungainly, and although he's extremely slow, he knows how to approach a fight where he needs to walk a guy down. He's been doing that, Joe Joyce, for what, a 10-year amateur career, WSB? Do you know what I mean? Joe Joyce knows how to walk a guy down and break him down. Fabio Wardley coming from the white collar, that's never really been his style anyway. Wardley's more of like a boxer puncher. If he's forced to walk a guy down and apply pressure, he's not really adept at that. He doesn't, I mean, he's got a decent chin, but I don't think he's got a Joe Joyce chin. And I don't think his jab's as good as Joe Joyce. Joe Joyce's jab is what really broke Parker down. Using the jab, he was able to take Parker's big shots, club away to the body and head. That's not really Fabio Wardley. Fabio Wardley's more episodic. He's not a guy that is going to constantly stay on you to wear you out like that. He attacks in spurts, yeah? I mean, just look at the first Fraser Clark fight. He would fight in spurts, and then he'd have to take a breather, and Fraser Clark would come back at him. If Fraser Clark is giving Fabio Wardley all those problems with his boxing skills, as slow as Fraser Clark is, I don't see Fabio Wardley beating Joseph Parker. He's much faster than Fraser Clark. I think he's a better boxer than Fraser Clark. All Fraser Clark's got over Joseph Parker is what? A bit of extra size? That was only a couple of fights ago, right? And then he got totally outboxed by Justice Hooney for the majority of that fight. Indeed, as Wayne said, that Joyce's jab took Dubois' eye out. Yeah, Joyce got a very good jab, and that's what helped to break Parker down. Wardley ain't got a jab like that. Kyle says, didn't Joyce stop boxing at 22? He did, but he had a very, very long amateur career. He basically turned pro at like 30 or something, Joe Joyce. So he was boxing in the amateurs for years and years and years. Loads of amateur fights, fought in the Olympics, obviously, WSB, fought Usyk in the WSB. Just to give you an indication of the kind of quality he was going up against. Lad Bear says Parker was sick against Joyce. Yeah, I've heard him say that. But I guess every fighter that loses has an excuse. Most of them anyway. Big up Shane. Yeah, I'm doing good. Hope you're doing good too. How we doing out there, world? Shout out to everyone just locking in. We're talking about Joseph Parker, Fabio Wardley. Oleksandr Usyk's advisor, Sergey Lapin, according to Mike Coppinger, says that Usyk's going to fight 5 more times before retiring. And then we're hearing from David Haye that Derek Chisora is not going to fight Jerome Miller or Zheli Zhang, but instead it's going to be a trilogy with Dillian Whyte. I don't see that as locked in, guaranteed to happen, because Derek Chisora is a trickster. He could be using it as a negotiating tactic, as somebody else in the live chat said. But those are the topics we're talking about here. We got Christian. So shout out from Denmark. That's right. If everyone can hit the like button, be much appreciated. If we can get up to 75 likes, we've only got 52 at the moment. We can get up to 75, that's 50% of the concurrent viewers liking the video, liking this live stream. So big up everyone in advance for sticking a like on this stream. It really helps with visibility. JR says, Hatman, did you see the Moment of Contact documentary? I started watching it, but it was late. I will finish it either later on today or tomorrow. About the Brazilian UFO incident. I did start watching it. So Planty says, Joyce used his jab and pressure against Parker. Parker didn't have enough power to keep Joyce off him, and Joyce had a good engine and wore him down. Yes. I don't see Fabio Wardley being able to pull off those tactics. I don't think he has the jab that Joyce has. I don't think he has the work rate that Joyce has. I don't think he has the chin that Joyce has. Not that Fabio Wardley's chinny. No, he's got a decent chin. But I don't think he can take the kind of whacks without being noticeably hurt that Joyce back then was able to take. Terry O'Conman says, Oleksandr Usyk is going to clean out the best few of two eras. Prime form Parker, Caballel, and finally the super kid Moses Itauma, which should age very well. Top 5 heavyweight and cruiser, GOAT. All right. Carlton Palmer, big up. He says, seems like Parker is punching a little bit harder these days. I would agree with that. Because Andy Lee is a Kronk fighter. And they really emphasize power punching in the Kronk gym. That's what they teach you. That's how they get you to refine, or they help you to refine your punching power, your power punching technique. And I do think that has happened with Joseph Parker. I'm not saying he's some big one-punch knockout man now, but I do think he's hitting a bit harder now under Andy Lee than he was earlier on in his career. You can improve your punching power. Anyone who says you can't is just foolish, ignorant. You can improve it. You can't take Paulie Malignaggi and turn him into Tommy Hearns. Of course not. But you can improve your punching power to some extent. You absolutely can. I mean, I would argue that Derek Chisora improved his punching power over the years. You guys remember early on in Chisora's career, he was always slapping with his punches. He wasn't turning the knuckles over. You guys remember that? But really, after the David Haye fight, he started turning his punches over much better and scoring these big knockouts. Yeah? Derek Chisora is a prime example of somebody who improved their punching power over the years by refining his technique. Harley says, wait till Itauma matures even more and gets a few years older. He'll be something we've never seen before. The box says Parker punching harder or subtly punching harder and adding 20 pounds of lean muscle. Is that not suspicious? I don't think it's 20 pounds of lean muscle. Parker's got quite a bit of body fat on him. If you look at Parker when he fought AJ, he was way more lean back then. So I don't think he's added 20 pounds of lean muscle. And I think there's quite a bit of body fat on him. Not like he's blubbery, but, you know, he's by no means ripped at all. So, look, it's possible that he could be on something, but it's not hard for certain guys to put size on. For me, it's not hard. I've always been someone, I've always had a body type in the genetics where I can put muscle on very quickly. I can also put fat on very quickly. Some people have that kind of body type. Other people who would do the exact same type of training as me, they'd put no muscle on or very little muscle on. And they look at me and think, how the hell are you putting all this muscle on? It's genetics. I've never even taken creatine, never mind roids or anything like that. So people have to factor in genetics into the equation. Do you know what I mean? I mean, you look at Pacific Islanders, they're naturally bulky, muscular people. Yeah? Samoans and Maori and all that. Those guys look like they can easily pack on muscle. It's a genetic thing. Big up Matt Borgerson for the super chat. He says Derek Chisora has horrible CTE. It's very sad. Yeah, I think he does. I think he does have CTE. But he's a crash out, as Americans like to say. Derek Chisora is a crash out. He doesn't want any sympathy for the CTE. He doesn't want anyone saying he should retire. He'll actually insult you if you insist that he should retire. So what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? Derek Chisora, I guess, is, more libertarian in his mindset. Like, don't try and protect me. Don't do any of that. I'm a man. I can make my own decisions. It is what it is. So big up, Matt. I understand your concern. But Chisora himself is not concerned. And it's not like he needs the money. See, I'd feel more sorry for a guy who got robbed and cheated his whole career and has to fight on because he's broke. He has to fight on because he needs to pay the bills. Derek Chisora is not fighting on because he needs to pay the bills. He's doing it for the love of it because he's a crazy Zimbabwean MFer. Do you know what I mean? He's not doing it because he's desperate. He's just doing it because he loves it. And he loves the extra money too, but he's not short of a few quid. Evil Uncle Phil says Chisora was hilarious on the Sun Sport with Adelaide. Have I seen that one? Maybe. Tony says Moses Atama has unreal physical strength like gym strength. Yeah, I've seen. Shane says he do be smoking a lot of the old devil's lettuce lately though too. Okay, Evil Uncle Phil says, nah, Chisora's wife is a gold digger allegedly, so he definitely needs the money. Without it, he's screwed. I don't think Chisora is that foolish when it comes to women. I wouldn't be at all surprised if most of what Derek Chisora owns is in his mum's name. You know that one? You know them ones? I wouldn't be so, because Derek Chisora is very close to his mum. I wouldn't at all be surprised if most of what Chisora owns is in his mum's name. Meaning, if there's some type of divorce or whatever, the woman can't take nothing from him because officially Derek Chisora's got no money. It's all in the mum's name. I'm speculating here, obviously, but speculation based upon how shrewd I think Derek Chisora is. You don't strike me like a simp. He's an African man. An old school African man. Old school African men don't really do the simping. Carlton Palmer says, if Usyk does go for a couple more years, do you think Atama will be ready for him at the end of that stint? I think he'll be as ready as, well, will he be ready for him? He'll be more ready than he is now. Who knows when Atama will peak? He might be a guy that peaks very early like Mike Tyson, or a guy who ages like fine wine and peaks later on like Lennox Lewis. Who knows? He'll be more ready than he is now. That's what I can say. There you go. Tony S. says he tried chirps in Sky Nicholson. That's not simp behavior, is it? Ocean Blue says, but he did wear Barbie shorts for the Washington fight. Yeah, but that was for his daughter. That weren't for his wife, was it? That was for his daughter. And Derek Chisora is an eccentric character, so he wore the Barbie shorts for his daughter. Yusuf says, all in mum's name, then lose 40% of it due to inheritance tax. There's ways around those things. And he's still a Zimbabwean citizen. Can he do it through there somehow? I don't know. Evil Uncle Phil says, no, he weren't moving to where he was basically trolling her because of the Hearn connection. Even if he was just trolling her, the fact he did that, if he was a simp, I don't think he'd have the heart to do that because of the way that his wife might misconstrue his actions. But Derek Chisora didn't care whether his wife misconstrued it or not. Carlton Palmer says, Derek's a bit more switched on than it might seem. Yeah, he is. Derek Chisora is shrewd. He's a very shrewd man in the boxing business. He's all about his money. Being around all these sharks in the boxing industry for all these years, I don't think Derek Chisora would get screwed over by a woman. I don't think so. Because to survive in the boxing business, you have to be clever, crafty. You're literally swimming with the sharks. It's not like basketball or American football where you get taken care of financially. In boxing, you got to fend for yourself. That's why in American football and basketball, you see so many of them simps get rinsed by women. Because they get taken care of, those guys. In boxing, you don't get taken care of. It's every man for himself. It's laissez-faire capitalism. It's like the epitome of laissez-faire capitalism. I know I'm mispronouncing the French, right? Laissez-faire capitalism, however you pronounce it in French. In boxing, you really got to be shrewd. FIFA says, have you seen Pat Brown fight yet? Yeah, I've seen him fight. Entertaining style. Looks promising. He might be the next one in the cruiserweight division. You know, the next guy up. Eddie Hearn has basically inferred that Pat Brown has been given, or at least in the past, has given Moses Atama all he can handle in sparring, and maybe more than he can handle. Rich Franklin says Chisora has his own podcast now with Jermaine Genius. Big up, Ryan. What's up? What's up? There you go. That's how shrewd Chisora is. FIFA says, I remember when Chisora faked an injury for the Takam fight to get more money from Hearn. That's how shrewd he is. Can a guy like that really get screwed over by a woman? I doubt it. I think Chisora's got his ducks in a row. I think he knows how to handle these chicks out here. I think he knows what he's doing. Evil Uncle Phil says Pat Brown is probably someone who does well in sparring but cannot do it in front of a crowd. Why do you say that? Just out of curiosity. GMS Nightmare says, yeah, Chisora is an African man. We don't do simping. It's rare. I mean, there are some African men who do simp, but it's far less common in Africa than it is in the West. Way less common. Way, way, way less common. Most African countries are still heavily patriarchal. They smile in your face, all the while they want to take your place. Them backstabbers, them backstabbers. All right, peeps, this stream has gone very well, but I'm going to wrap it up now. Shout out to everybody who joined the conversation, and a special shout out to those who donated via Super Chat. They were GMS Nightmare, Mr. Luca, Matt Borgerson, Big T, excuse me. So, yeah, special shout out to those who donated via Super Chat. GMS Nightmare says, because beautiful women are easier to get in Africa, women are not upheld as a prize. Exactly that. So, yeah, until next time, take care, be good. We'll catch you on the other side. I'm out.